so I don't think anybody has slides to present. I think we're still waiting on Owen, but then I'll introduce the speakers and we'll start the conversation. But hi, Sophia. Hi, Rohit. It's nice to meet you both.
Hi, Gitika. Nice meeting you. Great to be here. Great to be here. Excited for the discussion.
Yes. Where are you in the UK right now?
I'm in the UK, yes. So lovely bit of nighttime right now, late night session.
Yeah, I was just about to say, what time is it there right now?
It's only 9:40 right now, so it's nothing too bad. You know, I'm young, so you know, this is light work for me. Don't worry.
Sophia, you're in California, right?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. It's only like 1:43 for me. Lunchtime, no worries.
Thanks.
Thanks to everybody who's coming from a tougher time zone, though.
Yeah, like Akriti and Shivam are both from India, and it's like 2 a.m. there.
Crazy.
Yeah, so once Owen gets here, we can get started. And yes, the session will be recorded, Marifa. We'll post it on like the YouTube channel for the Human Space Project, like probably in 2 weeks, I'm guessing.
Usually for Human Space Program, we have it posted on the YouTube channel within about 1 to 2 weeks. So keep checking back. And I think it's under Space Education Symposium. And you all have my contact info. If you can't find it, just ping me or find me on socials or ask Gitika. I'm sure Gitika will be hip to when and where the videos are posted. So just check back in 1 to 2 weeks.
I feel like the breakout room is not open, so Owen is not able to join because he emailed me he was here. So give me just 1 second. I don't know what happened.
Gitika, I can move him in here. I just don't see his name in the role.
Yeah, no, I think I'm not sure. Let me email him.
What's his last name?
Marr, M-A-R-R. I just emailed him, so maybe he.
Okay. Yeah, let him know we're in group 4. I don't see him in the meeting at all. In any of the rooms at all. So maybe he needs a fresh link.
Yeah, I just emailed him, so hopefully he sees it. But we can get started. We should wait like 1 more minute, and then we can get started with the panelists who are here.
You all just start whenever you're ready, and welcome to everyone. We're happy to have you.
Honestly, we can probably just get started and Owen can just join us because I don't want to, I know we have a great conversation that's going to happen. So we can get started. Hello, everyone. Again, for those who just joined, my name is Gitika and I'm the founder of Ignited Thinkers, a nonprofit organization I founded in the 8th grade to spread space education to all students. I'm also a freshman at Columbia University studying biomedical engineering, and I'm an aspiring aerospace physician and astronaut. So I'm very excited to be joined by three. Owen just came in by 3 very special guests, Sophia Jones, Owen Marr, and Rohit Mundan, and they 3 will be, they're all young professionals in the space sector, all from different backgrounds, and so I'm very excited to let them share their journey and how they navigated this industry and getting their foot in the door as a young professional. So welcome. To kick off our conversation, I'm going to first start off by asking all of you to introduce yourselves and what you do, what your current role is. To start off, Sophia, do you want to take the lead on the conversation?
Sure. Thanks so much, Gitika. And hello, everybody. My name is Sophia. My interest in space is specifically within space policy. I currently study at Stanford University. My undergrad is in astrophysics, and then I'm getting my master's in public policy. It's not common to find space policy degrees right now, which is certainly not a surprise. And so I'm kind of doing my own little DIY degree situation. After I graduate in a couple of months here, I'm going to be joining SpaceX full-time, doing international policy for them on their Starlink team. In the past, I've interned for SpaceX, the Aerospace Corporation, Space for Humanity, which is a nonprofit, and then my first internship was at NASA. So I have lots of different experiences as a young professional. I've been really enjoying getting comfortable with networking and things like that. Similar to Gitika, I don't have a ton of like resources going into being a space young professional, and so I kind of had to build it from the ground up. Excited to talk to you guys more about that today. Thanks so much.
Awesome, thank you. Owen?
Yep, can you hear me? Awesome. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Owen Marr. I'm an Aerospace Systems Engineer at Blue Origin. So I work on the new Shepard program, which is our reusable human spaceflight vehicle. I do astronaut and payload integration. So I've been at Blue for, I think, about 14 or 15 months now. Before that, I was a student at the University of Michigan. So I did undergrad in aerospace and then a master's in space systems engineering. So fairly new to the industry, really excited to talk about kind of the lessons learned. There's definitely some things that I could have done better. So happy to talk about those and try and pass down that knowledge for folks that are either still in school or early into the industry. Happy to talk about mentorship and just general advice for getting started in the industry. So happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and Sophia, I met her 2 years ago. She's on the Ignited Thinkers board of directors, and I met Owen at New Space in Seattle. And this is my first time meeting Rohit. So hello, Rohit. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, thanks Gitika for introducing me here. You can feel free to call me Ro, and I'm actually a bit of an anomaly in this panel because I think, so everyone's actually had a background in astrophysics or aerospace and have gone into the space sector, but for me, I read biochemistry at university, and from there I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't really like doing labs from 9 to 5, so that led me to management consulting, like a classic. And that's what I've been doing for the past couple of years. So I've been a management consultant specializing in corporate strategy and transformation in a boutique consultancy in London. And I've always had an interest in space, but never really knew how I could add value to the sector. Coming from a non-technical background, I just thought, I'll leave that to the astronauts and the aerospace engineers and whatnot. But recently I kind of had an epiphany, and it was like, if I'm going to if I was to die tomorrow, right, I want to be able to say that I've contributed in some way and added some value to the space sector and making us, move forwards to becoming multiplanetary. And that just led me to kind of cold network people on LinkedIn and just network of people who are within the space sector, understand what was going on. I took an MIT certification on the new space economy and just to kind of understand the landscape of what was going on. And yeah, eventually I got in contact with a guy called Guillermo Online, who's actually giving a talk in parallel to this on Venus. And he's got a venture to essentially send human Venus by 2050. So that was a really interesting venture. And eventually, after a few calls, I got recruited to be executive director of that nonprofit organization. So that is what I'm doing right now alongside management consulting. And Human Venus Foundation is a nonprofit essentially focused on promoting Venus-focused science and education alongside establishing a global community of Venus-focused professionals. So that is me in a nutshell. I will not take up any more time. Gitika, I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction and that background as well. I think that, age is definitely, or your background has nothing to do with entering the space industry. So I'm glad you found your way back into this cool space. So my first question I wanted to ask everyone was really about how you transitioned as a student or as, a young professional into the space sector. A lot of the times it's difficult to find, especially like with Sophia and Owen, like right out of college, going to Blue Origin and SpaceX, like those are very difficult, very competitive aerospace companies. How did you navigate your way from a young professional as a student to getting a job at a space company? What was that process like for you? And did internships help that process in any way? Sophia, do you want to kick us off again?
Sure. Yeah, happy to answer that question. So yeah, I think internships were definitely very helpful for me with my transition into the space industry. I think for a lot of people, not even just in the space sector, but a lot of my peers in general, when it comes to finding jobs in the field that you're hoping to join, there's kind of like this one or two like breakthrough moments, so to speak, like whether it's an internship or a research opportunity or something where like someone kind of takes a chance on you, and that really helps you build yourself, get a lot of good experience, and then prove to other people that you're really serious about this. For me, that breakthrough moment was my freshman year of college when I got an internship at NASA. That was like I would have never thought I could have gotten that I was following NASA on Instagram just because like everybody follows NASA on Instagram, and they were like, oh yeah, like apply to be an intern, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, I didn't really know what an internship was. I knew that they were geared towards students. And I was like, okay, I don't even care if they pay me. I ended up doing a volunteer internship, but that to me was my breakthrough moment of like, okay, like I have something to prove that like I like space, I can do it, I've done something. And so from there, it was kind of just the snowball effect of like taking chances on these internships that I didn't really think I could pull off. I cold emailed somebody about my next one at Space for Humanity. She was very helpful, especially during the pandemic, helping me find work. After that, I applied to an internship that was only for graduate students. I was a sophomore at the time in college, but I was like, I'm just going to apply because like, whatever, they can reject me and I like nothing will happen. But they ended up accepting me over PhD students and law students. And so I was really glad I took that chance. And then same thing happened with SpaceX, where I was like, you know what, like YOLO, I'm just going to try. And so you really have to have the courage to say like, it doesn't really hurt me to try for these opportunities, but you'll never know unless you apply for them. And so then that's sort of what helped me build up into a really helpful SpaceX internship, where I was able to meet with lots of people from the company, network for that summer, and find an eventual permanent home where I could work full time. But it was very progressive. It wasn't like I just suddenly like jumped out of the gate and was like, hello, I'm gonna work full time at SpaceX at this really high impact role. I thank myself every day, my 18-year-old self, for just like randomly applying to this NASA internship. And as hard as it was to balance with school and how intimidating it was to do software development, which was not my background at all, it really did change my life.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that was beautifully said, which is like, don't tell yourself no, which is what I just mentioned in my previous session, which is a lot of times as a student, you doubt yourself and the capabilities you bring to an internship. But sometimes if you see that opportunity, even if you don't think you're qualified, just taking that chance and letting someone else make that decision for you, whether you're qualified or not, can go such a long way. That was the same experience I had with my first internship, which was also at NASA. So it's great that we had a similar journey. What about yourself, Owen?
Yeah, so I said I would give lessons learned of things I didn't do well. I never did an internship throughout undergrad or grad school, actually. I was doing research, so that's one thing I always tell students is if you don't find an internship, if you're still in school, talk to a professor and just say, hey, I'd like to work in the lab this summer. They will find you something, and that experience can help build internships. So make sure if you're not doing one, you do something aerospace engineering or whatever you're into related to the space industry. But yes, it's super intimidating to try and do it. So what Sophia said is right. Just apply to everything. Be really scrappy. Like go on LinkedIn and find people that are alumni of the school you go to or former coworkers that work in industry, and just be like, hey, can we chat? I think most of definitely my job now, but like I think everything I've ever done has been from like just reaching out to people, talking to them. So like, yes, apply to as many applications as you can, but my advice is also try and make as much human contact as possible. And like, if you do both of those things, you'll hopefully end up in a good path.
Yeah, I definitely think research is equivalent to an internship. And I think finding local community members who can support you in getting those research experiences are just as valuable. So it's great to hear. And Ro?
Yeah, those are really valuable points. I think for me, I didn't have any internships within aerospace at all. Like my qualifications are in management consulting. So I think, coming into the space sector, I was really kind of like worried about, I've got nothing to add to the sector at all. But it's really kind of interesting when you actually start networking with people. And I think the importance is networking, right? Like you need to speak to people and they made the decision for you, like you said, Gitika. So I think, it's going to be a case of if you are passionate about space, it's going to be, reach out to people who are on LinkedIn maybe, or within your network who are involved in the sector, and just have those conversations. Because for me, like every conversation I had with anyone who was within the space sector was just honestly really inspiring for me. And it kind of pushed me to kind of make that next call or reach out to the next person, even though you get a lot of people who just don't respond or whatever like that. It's just all part of the process. And I think your passion kind of drives you through, and that was the case with me. So yeah, networking is key, I'd say, for sure.
Yeah, no, I 100% second that. And I see a lot of nods around the room. So I think everyone agrees that I think networking is so key in terms of professional development, putting yourself on LinkedIn or Twitter or any other social media platform and just connecting with people and start introducing yourself and developing that community is so critical. And I think that leads me to my next question very perfectly, which is, how do you find mentors? A lot of young professionals want help, they want advice, they want to develop a platform and a community of supporters to get really cool opportunities to attend conferences, to get job experiences or research experiences. How do you get that initial effect or that initial, how do you get your foot in the door to even finding a mentor? Like, how did you guys go about that? And maybe Ro, you can start us off this time because I feel like it directly relates to what you just said.
I feel like my answer to all of these questions are going to be networks. But I mean, like, yeah, it's literally the truth, right? So I think for me, the biggest thing was Guillermo is my mentor. I think he's the founder of the Human Spheres Foundation, and he's kind of taught me the most about the space sector in itself from all of his years of experience. And I think I would never have come into contact with him if it wasn't for LinkedIn. I literally found his post on LinkedIn advertising for people who are outside of the space sector to come in and add value to the sector. And that was literally kind of like my mindset where I was like, wow, that's literally what I'm thinking. So I reached out to him, sending him an email with my CV and stuff. And obviously, I think with prior to that, because I didn't have anything that was aerospace related or space related on my CV, the one thing I wanted to do was actually have something to my name. So that led me to the MIT certification on the new space economy. That was, something I could have on my CV that actually said, okay, I've got some passion for the space sector. And I think that may have influenced him getting back to me. It may or may not have, I don't know. But it's always going to be helpful to have something to your name if you can, to kind of demonstrate your passion. Maybe it could be writing articles for a local agency within the space sector or something like that. But you can always create the opportunity yourself, I think, and it's just going to be, the way in which you do that is up to you. And again, networking is key.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in my previous session, I was saying the same thing, which is instead of going the traditional route of finding or applying for opportunities, you should create and open doors for yourselves. So whether it be like you were saying, like you found that message, but I think the biggest learning lesson from what you just said is you see a post or you see someone who's doing something exciting, take that extra step, go that extra step of reaching out to them, introducing yourself, and potentially trying to start an actual conversation. Because I was mentioning this earlier too, like I get LinkedIn messages where just like, hello, this is my name. But there's no content. So if you put like a message of, I want to have a Zoom call with you, I want to get to know you, we should have a conversation, I think that's like the extra step you need to get your foot in the door and making an actual connection. And that can go such a long way, just like it did in your life, especially with your experience with the organization you're directing now. So yeah. And Owen, did you have a similar experience in finding mentors? And even if you didn't have mentors, do you think, or if with your mentors right now, did they play a large role in your career today?
Yeah, so I think there is kind of like structured mentoring, which you can find through your company or through your university. And then what we just talked about was kind of the unstructured. In terms of like getting my role today, it was a combination of like structured professor mentorship and then also alumni and other informal mentorship. So I think looking into both is great. Like there could be resources at whatever institutes or organizations you're involved with that like spell out how to do it. And then the extra thing to do and what you should also do in parallel is go out and find folks and to talk tactically about how to get a mentor. We just kind of covered it, but like say, hey, this is why I'm interested in you. Like, I think you have a really cool job. I want to learn more about it. Can we have a conversation? And like the way to get a mentor is to have the first conversation, show that person like that you have demonstrated passion or interest in what they do, and like give them a reason to be like, yes, I want to talk to that person again, which is usually like, this is so cool. I want to learn more about you and how you got here. So yeah, think about that first message, tell them why you're interested in them and what you want to talk about. That makes it a lot easier for them to say, yes, of course, I'll talk.
Yeah, and I found the aerospace community is just, they're so passionate about space that they want to help the next generation. So more than not, at least more than half of the people you reach out to will respond to you. Yeah, and Sophia, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think to echo Owen and Ro's comments, networking is key. And I think I was very intimidated by that word when I first got to school and I heard people talking about like, oh yeah, are you networking? I'm like, what the heck is that? Like my parents didn't network growing up. Like I'm not like some well-connected person going into college. I think what's been helpful for me to like deepen my understanding of networking has been to be on the other side of the table now where people are reaching out to me, seeking my mentorship and advice. So like, backtrack to whenever Gitika like first cold messaged me on LinkedIn, we meet and I get to know her. And then now like months and years later, like I'm going to a conference and I'm thinking like, who would really like this? Gitika. Or like if she's posting about, on LinkedIn, having a new opportunity or going to this new school or something like that, like after meeting her, like always in my mind about how can I help this person? Is she looking for work? Can I connect her with somebody else who's interested? Like I hear about these medicine things. I'm like, you know what? I remember Gitika likes medicine and space. And so as soon as you like make that first connection with somebody, especially if you can call them or you can like literally talk to them face to face, it's sort of like this lingering connection in the back of their minds for a long time. And so connections like that, where I was able to like, meet with somebody and get the idea in their brain that I exist, that I like space policy, that I'm hoping for help, were really impactful, because months and years down the road, when it was time for me to find work, it took me weeks because there were so many people who were on my side rooting for me, trying to give me recommendations and trying to connect me with places that were hiring, that it was like I had this team of people who were rooting for me, which I don't really know how that happened. It's kind of crazy to think about, and I feel very grateful for that. But it really does just come down to taking that leap of faith and like meeting someone just like a friend. It's not this big ordeal where you have to like go over the top. Like it's just chill and you tell them about who you are and you connect about what you guys both love, which is space.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said. I think when you develop those meaningful relations, then, you end up thinking about them and connecting them with the right resources, which is how I found a lot of the opportunities that I did get. So I definitely echo what you were saying, Sophia. And something that I would like to just like add on to that is, even if you're not able to, for some reason, connect with a mentor or professional in the industry, something that I've noticed a lot of active social media users do is they post content every day or every few days, where they're constantly posting. Like, I don't know if you know Christina Korp. I love her. She's also on my board of directors. She's a huge inspiration for me because she posts something every day about where she is, where she is, what she's doing, the different people she's meeting in the space industry, or even just cool space news. And that keeps me thinking about her. Like, oh, Christina's doing this or Christina's doing that. And I think that's so important because you're putting yourself out there and people are like remembering you, what you're doing, and seeing ways to support you on social media. So developing that community is so important. And so my next question for all of you is, what was the biggest learning lesson that you learned as young professionals, whether it be when you were overcoming an obstacle or maybe a challenge you've had to overcome? Kind of what is the biggest learning lesson that you have gotten so far as a young professional in your career? This time we can maybe start off with Owen.
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier that like the transition from college to the industry feels a lot like the transition from like a senior in high school to like a freshman in college, where you come in and you're like, what is all of this? I have no idea what's going on. And so I think one thing I learned was patience, of just like, it will take time to get comfortable. And if you remember your, freshman year of college, it was probably similar, where you came in and had no idea what was going on. And then within a couple months, you found your feet and you had some direction. So I really preach like being patient when you're going through that transition. And it applies to a lot of stuff in school as well. Just like, be patient. If you do the right things, you will eventually get to where you're supposed to be. So don't stress about every little thing. Be patient, and it'll all hopefully work itself out one way or another. But just make sure you keep doing the right things to make it happen.
And that's a great analogy. Just like a sixth grader going into seventh grade with elementary and middle school, or high school student going into college, I think it can always be, a different part of your life is intimidating. So that's a great analogy. Sophia?
Yeah, I think reflecting back on what I wish I had known sooner, or what I wish I had started doing sooner, kind of in a different direction, is like reading the news. I think that reading different like websites about space news, like literally spacenews.com, there's all kinds of different newsletters that you can subscribe to that like for free just email you like a snippet every day of like, here's the highlights. That helped me feel really confident as a space enthusiast, beyond just liking the pretty pictures and thinking that launches are cool, but being able to sustain a conversation with somebody about like, oh, did you hear about this big like contract that NASA was just awarded? And I could be like, yes, like, let's talk about it. That extra step is free. Anybody can do it. And it makes you more aware of what's going on in the industry, not only so that you can establish yourself as somebody who's really like genuinely interested, but it also helps you pick out certain things that you're passionate about. So it helped me get a grip on the industry and sort of think about the main pillars. Like, you've got defense space, and you've got civil, and then you've got commercial, and maybe like academia and research. And kind of getting my bearings on all of these different companies and all of these different like kinds of satellites that are being developed and all these different missions that are happening, it can be kind of overwhelming, exciting, but overwhelming. And so just reading about it and letting myself like soak it all in helped me find what I wanted to do. And then also just generally understand the industry enough so that I'm like, yeah, like this space stuff is cool. I can talk about it, and I'm really here for the long run.
Yeah, that's incredible advice. There's actually this newsletter. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Payload Space.
Yeah.
They send so, yeah, and they send a mail every morning. I swear they have a new like huge mail that they send every day. I don't know how they get that much space news, but also it's a big industry, so I'm not surprised. But I get like a mail from them every morning about all the space news of the day, and it's such a great way to stay updated, but also get comfortable with topics that you might not be comfortable with. Like for example, as I mentioned, I'm a biomedical engineer. That's like I'm a pre-med background, not a engineering background or like a rocket science background with a physics major. So I think reading the news enables me to learn about what's happening with the rockets, with Starship, and kind of get into the nitty-gritty in a comfortable way. So being exposed to different content material helps me feel more educated. So I definitely agree. Reading space news is a good way to, you know, get your foot in the door in a better way. And last but not least, Ro.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going to build up on what Sophia and Owen have raised there. I think patience is a big thing. I think learning is a massive thing as well, right? So I think for me, the biggest lesson would probably be not to doubt yourself. I think it's going to be a case of, you know, if you are passionate about this, only you know about if you're passionate about space or whatever you're passionate about, right? So it's your job to kind of push that forwards and actually drive that forwards. And I think learning is your best friend, right? If you're going to be learning and becoming competent about what's going on within the sector, you're going to be able to network with people and actually maintain and hold conversations, which is going to be key. And that will maintain relationships as well, right, moving forwards. So I think learning, subscribing to newsletters and different kind of academic papers and things, and reading, keeping up to date with certain areas or niches you're interested in within space would be a good shout for sure. And I think another good lesson is that there is a place for everyone in space. Space is not just tied to aerospace or anyone from a technical background. It could be people from a business background. It could be people from, I don't know, a psychological background like Anahita from Earthscape VR. Like there is room for everyone in space. Space is literally an extension of our current existing sectors within the business economy, right? It's just an extension of that outwards. And if you look at it that way, there is always a place for you, no matter where you're from, what your background is, there is a place for you in space. So yeah, just don't give up hope and keep having faith in yourself, I think is my biggest thing to say.
Yeah, perfectly said, especially what you said at the end. Almost, I said this in the previous interview before. I love to think space is its like own little world. So every career, every major you're going to need in the real world, from like a mechanic to a space policy enthusiast, artist, journalist, you're going to need just in the space sector. You know, so I love to think of space as like its own little mini world. So yeah, I definitely agree that space is for everyone. There's diversity in not only the people, but the careers and the skill sets you're going to need in the industry. And so my last and final question for all of you before we open up to Q&A is, what are your own personal future aspirations? Where do you hope, or where do you see your career kind of evolving and growing? And what excites you about the future of the space industry? And this time we'll start with Sophia.
That's a big question, especially, you know, since it's so early in my career, there's so many different possible directions that I can take it. I think that's part of the beauty of it is like, you know, I have like 3 or 4 or 5 different things that I would love to do one day, and I hope that I can settle on at least one of them. I think in the near to medium term, any kind of like strategic policy is really interesting to me, which is part of the reason why I'm super excited to be joining SpaceX, because they're obviously a big player right now. But just in general, thinking about like how we can better collaborate between different agencies, different countries and organizations in the space sector, because it's such a planetary, you know, vision that we have. Really excited about that. But then there's other ways too that I can take my interest in space. There's always like space law. I could go and try and, you know, teach either space policy or like teach younger kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, physics again. Become an individual contributor and do more of the engineering and like science aspect of it. Like the possibilities are really endless. I think that's one of the best parts about the industry, is because it's evolving so quickly. As long as you have like a solid skill set and an interest, like you'll find something. And so at the very least, I'm just hoping to have jobs that will fulfill my skills and my interests. But my vision is all about just a space sector that is more collaborative, more sustainable for sure, more inclusive and diverse, and hopefully more democratized and more commercial. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing where your career will go within the next 10 years. I mean, you've already done so much for just graduating from college and landing a position, a really good position at SpaceX. So I'm really looking forward to see where you do go. But that's great to hear. Ro?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably to continue leading on at the Human Systems Foundation, leading that nonprofit venture. I think from our side, it's a multi-generational vision, right? So it's going to be long term, maybe something we won't see realized in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime if I have kids, beyond. But it's something I want to be contributing to for the foreseeable future. I think adding value to the sector in the way that I can to maybe push humanity forwards to becoming a multi-planetary species is definitely when I wake up in the morning, that's something that kind of gets me out of bed and like, yeah, I need to be doing something to be contributing towards that. That's my personal kind of like motivations. I think I love networking. I love speaking to new people. So maintaining relationships, building new relationships with people, moving forwards, collaborations from people all around the world is going to be something that's going to be amazing. Looking forward to doing. So I think to continue doing that would be great. And I don't know. I think for me, like a TED talk would love to do at some point in my life, but yeah, I don't know how that's going to happen or when that's going to happen. But yeah, that's something I'm aiming for at some point in my life. But yeah, that's me, I guess, in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, put it out into the universe because it'll definitely happen. I think Rebecca was saying something about if you think of it, like it might happen. So just say it and put it out into the universe, it'll happen. But yeah, I definitely agree. If you have like manifestation. Yeah. So if you have like a goal or like a purpose or a vision with what you're doing, I think life can take you in so many ways, but just having that one drive and that one purpose is so important. So I'm glad that you kind of have a direction of where you wanted to head. And last but not least, Owen.
Yeah, so to answer what excites me about space first, it is that there is so much going on and that we're making space more accessible to people. That's the main reason I joined New Shepard was like, we're working to make that vehicle as compatible with as many people as possible. So like we've already flown the youngest and the oldest and all these other things. But I think that'll be a really cool vehicle to make the experience of space available to the highest number of people. We've got amazing projects like, I mean, everyone saw Starship this week. Like there's a lot of other human spaceflight stuff going on that's super exciting. So I'm really looking forward to that in the future, just more and more people in space. As far as personal aspirations, I really like what I'm doing at Blue right now. I plan on staying there. I have sort of decided that I might want to go back to school. Apparently being out for a year has told me I need to go back more for like the MBA route. So I'm starting the GMAT study, which feels a lot like the SAT or ACT. It's weird. But I am focusing on that and will hopefully be staying on at Blue while I do that. But yeah, I'm really excited to see like more and more people in space. So that's like what I'm really focused on right now.
Yeah, that's incredible. Actually, this morning, the astronaut panel, we had Sarah Savory come talk, and it was inspiring to hear her talk about her experience as, going on a flight on Blue Origin and how that experience was. So you have a very important role at Blue in changing so many lives, but also giving this once in a lifetime experience to so many more individuals across the world.
Yeah, and Sophia mentioned Space for Humanity. If you guys haven't looked into that, like they sponsor seats for people for like Sarah and Katya was like a grad student who got to fly with us. Like they will sponsor seats to fly to space, which is really cool. So if you haven't looked up Space for Humanity, go check it out.
Definitely, yes. And this was such an incredible panel and discussion. I'm sure everyone who's listening has lots of questions for you. It's so inspiring to see all of you three doing such incredible things at such a young age. And I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you in person. I already met Owen in person, but also just to see where your careers end up going. So thank you so much for doing this panel. And let's give them a round of applause and we're open for Q&A. Anybody have any questions? Oh, Rebecca has a question. Start us off.
Okay, normally I hold back, but I am nerding out over Sophia right now because, hi, Sophia, I'm Rebecca. I just sent you a LinkedIn request. Hopefully we can be friends. I admire you so much, what you're doing. You and I have similar paths. I'm at Harvard University. I'm finishing up my master's. And I concentrated in both my undergraduate and my graduate degree in space law and policy. And you're absolutely right. We're a little early, or at least academia hasn't caught up yet. And so we basically had to forge our own degrees and our own concentrations. So my question to you is, first of all, once you get to SpaceX, if you ever need a new colleague, just give me a call. I'd love to fill in. I'll do an application, whatever it takes. I would love to work with you all on international law. So my question to you is, can you explain to us what you'll be working in? You said international law with Starlink. So what are the issues right now? And I know it's just a quick Q&A session, but could you just give us the highlights of what it is you'll be working on? What are the challenges, and what are the effects of your future career with SpaceX?
Totally. Yeah. Great to meet you, Rebecca. Thanks so much for your question. So my title, it used to be Market Access Lead. They've since renamed themselves to, Global Licensing and Activation. And basically, I like to think of it as like Starlink is a video game where we have a bunch of different characters, and each of the characters are countries. And some of them we've unlocked. So we've got a lot of people who are using Starlink in like South America and Europe, but we still have a lot of countries that we have yet to figure out. So we only have 50 of, the hundreds of countries that are on Earth. And so the rest, we still have to go there and we meet with whatever their equivalent of the FCC is. If they don't have one, then we try and figure it out and kind of scrap it together. But what we're really trying to do is work out the policy and the regulation to figure out how we can serve them. So that's sort of like the first side. It's a very passive, ongoing conversation with a lot of countries about how to get them Starlink. On the other half is like some of the more crisis response related things. So like when Starlink was rolled out to Ukraine, for example, that's something that my team would also be overseeing, is like, how can we quickly support a country on the fly that needs it? And so just in general, we're thinking about how do we get the foot in the door for Starlink in these different countries? And then once they're a little bit more established, then we pass it on to the people who are more knowledgeable about things like marketing and customer service and stuff like that. So that's sort of what my job is. I think it's pretty cool.
That is really cool. So you're not talking about like working with the United Nations and the Outer Space Treaty. You're talking more like each country, winning over each country to be able to bring global internet access.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yes, Akriti?
I always wondered, like, is there any platform or something where space enthusiasts, used to connect or, discuss news or, ask some queries or doubts or understand the rocket science behind this? So is there any platform, a common platform?
So I think there's not like a central platform. In my experience, like space, I think we talked about space news sites earlier. Like a lot of that stuff gets shared on LinkedIn, and there's some interesting like LinkedIn conversations about it. And then a lot of it occurs on Twitter. So like what I always tell people is it's great to be active on those platforms, but you don't have to be. Like all you have to do is create accounts for them, and you can see everything that's going on, which is half the battle. As far as like getting it, like if you don't have a LinkedIn and a Twitter set up, set those up and just go follow like Eric Berger, Scott Manley, like all these kind of known space people, and they kind of like curate the news for you. And then you can also like obviously go to Payload and Space News. But I think in my experience, LinkedIn and Twitter are the two big ones. What do others think?
I just put this in the chat to follow Michael Sheets. He is basically like the space reporter on all related space news. He's awesome. I met him too. Very nice guy. He's also happy to connect with students. But I agree. Unfortunately, there isn't like a central platform. I think that's also a testament to just how massive the space industry is, because a central platform would be like millions of people talking about how cool space is. So I think it's good to find smaller communities, a lot of ones that are focused on like younger generations, like the Space Generation Advisory Council or SEDS are good places too, to just nerd out about things like this. But yeah, it really just depends on like what you're looking for. I second what Owen said.
Yeah, I'd say for me personally as well, LinkedIn is probably the biggest platform for me. I don't have Twitter, but LinkedIn has definitely been, serving its purpose in terms of networking. And yeah, I've just seen in the chat there, Jeff Faust is amazing as well. I had a conversation with him actually a couple of weeks ago about Venus. So yeah, I think if you follow these people who are journalists within the space sector, people who are influential in the space sector, you can stay up to date with what's going on in the space sector, and also, maybe even network with them as well down the line. So yeah, LinkedIn would be my kind of port of call if I had to choose.
Yeah, and just like adding on top of the social media, like Ron was mentioning space news, there's a lot of other newsletters. We mentioned Payload. Those are great to have in your inbox. But if you're looking for ways to have discussions, if you haven't already, I would join like SEDS, based like the chapter based off your geographic location, or SJC, they have smaller groups where you can join interest groups based off what space topic you're interested in. And they have monthly meetings. So you can connect with folks or other young professionals or professionals who are interested in that specific space topic. And you can join the monthly meetings, network, make connections with people with similar interests. So I would definitely check out those organizations.
Anything on Reddit or Discord? I've seen some like Reddit groups, but I haven't seen anything like focused on young professionals in space.
If you want to follow like the SpaceX Reddits, those are really good. Lots of memes as well. And there's like r/space. There's definitely ones out there. Good mention.
There's actually also a Discord, now that I'm thinking of it. There's a young, he's a space YouTuber. He's like, he's interviewed like the Inspiration 4 crew. He has a whole Discord actually based in the UK, but it's open to everyone. I can actually send you that link as well.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for the answers.
I just want to say I'm so excited for all of you. I'm 62. I've got a flight to space booked with Blue Origin, and I'll get there sometime, but I'd love to connect sometime as well. But wow, looking at the way the industry is changing now compared to when I was your age, there's so many opportunities with so many companies in so many different fields. I do a lot of work talking to students, and one of my favorite jobs to mention to middle schoolers is Joe, the barista at Spaceport. So he works for Virgin Galactic, making coffee and drinks for people that are going to fly into space and people that are building spaceships. So students in New Mexico can say, wait a minute, I can be involved in that and just be in the hospitality industry, or in any number of things, photographers, graphic artists, computer network experts that manage all the data that comes off their flights, all kinds of things. So another thing I mention a lot to students is like, you never know where you're going to be. I'm sure that people signed up to fly into space on these commercial flights like I am, or people working for Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin 15 years ago would have no idea that they'd be doing what they're doing now. So it's just I think you never really know where you could be in 10 years or 5 years or 15 years. So great to have you all here.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think that's such an important point. Just like looking at how the industry has evolved just within the past 10 years makes me excited for how it'll change in the next 10 years. Whenever I mention space medicine, it's such a new field. And just recently at like Columbia Medical School, they just created an interest group for space medicine. So it's crazy to see how just like times are changing and people are starting to realize about all the interdisciplinary career opportunities that exist in space, and how it's not just for engineers or physicists, but there's a lot of other diverse opportunities. So it's very exciting. Anybody else have any questions or comments they want to share with the panel? I guess I had a question for Ro. I'm curious to learn more about Venus. How do you see, or what's your future vision for taking this organization forward? I mean, we always talk about going to Mars, but not Venus. So I'm curious to hear like how you want to continue growing the organization, as well as what your kind of vision is for the future of the organization.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, Humans to Venus Foundation is a nonprofit side. It's part of two parts, right? So there's a for-profit side, which is going to be focused on essentially sending missions to Venus, eventually manned missions to Venus by 2050. And so the for-profit side is essentially focused on promoting Venus-focused education, the need for science and education surrounding Venus. So we kind of have, Venus speaker series events, Venus summits, and we have an online members portal as well, where we have, guest speakers such as, NASA's Jeffrey Landis. I don't know if you're familiar. Sarah Seeger from MIT has come on. She's been part of our community, so she's great. So having people who are within the sector, who are leading within Venus-focused science and education, sharing their insights on research and insights on new developments in the sector would be great. So that's kind of what we're trying to push for in the coming kind of months and years, in the build up to actually sending people to Venus when that kind of starts to happen. So Guillermo is actually giving a talk on that in parallel to this on the for-profit venture side of things. But I think the kind of the general gist of it is going to be, we're quite reliant on Starship being up and functional. And I think a lot of businesses are missing out on the fact that Starship is going to be a massive inflection point for the space sector, right? So once Starship is fully functional, probably by the this year, I'd expect it would be, honestly, we'll be going to space, we'll be going to Mars, we'll be going to Venus pretty easily. We'll be carrying things there and back. And I think it's so hard to kind of see where the space sector is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. And the rate is growing, the rate is being privatized. So it's really exciting. And I think from our side, it's just going to be, promoting Venus-focused education and trying to, add Venus to the commercial narrative of Moon, Mars, and beyond, making that Moon, Venus, Mars, and beyond, and doing all of those in addition to improving life here on Earth.
Definitely, yeah. So I'm guessing your favorite planet is Venus.
I love all the planets. I'm not going to be discriminating against any of them, but Venus is kind of like what I'm working towards and trying to, add that to narrative and, stop neglection of Venus. I think is going to be the thing I'm working towards. So yeah. Love them all.
Definitely, that's great to hear. Yeah, that's great to hear. Does anybody have any other questions that they want to ask the panelists? I have another question for Sophia. I know, Sophia, like Rebecca was mentioning how you innovated your own degree. And as someone who I didn't know it was possible to do that, and not all universities have that flexibility, but I'm curious when you were interested in space policy, how did you go about creating your own major and taking the classes necessary in order to get the skill sets for you to kind of achieve your own career aspirations in space policy?
Yeah, so I guess I might have misspoken a little bit. So I didn't necessarily create my own degree. I'm mostly studying two things that are tangential enough, if that makes sense. So I wanted to make sure that I had the space half down. And I was originally going to go to college just to study physics and do research and become a researcher for the rest of my life. But then I also discovered the public policy master's, and that was sort of how I made the DIY combination, so to speak. You're right, a lot of universities do let you customize your own majors. I didn't end up doing that because I wanted to go really in depth into each of them individually. But I think that's one of the great things about, the space industry itself, is especially when I've been applying to jobs, I've been seeing less and less of you need to have the specific aeroastro major or something very equivalent to that to you hopefully have something technical, but it's okay if you don't. I think that a lot of them are kind of loosening their grip on the specific types of majors that are pathways towards being talented for the space sector. And so for me, it was how do I make sure that I can speak both languages? I can talk to a person who loves space about the policy, and then I can talk to the person who does policy about space. And so that's sort of how I ended up there.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important role, even with space and communication. I was talking with Meredith, who is a space journalist, and she's based in New York, but she goes across the country doing different conferences and just communicating about space. Because sometimes taking that complex lingo and turning it into simple terminology everyone can understand is so critical, and something a lot of individuals don't feel confident enough to do, because either they're in the deep spectrum of I know nothing about space, or I know to the nitty gritty of every single thing that happens in a propulsion system. So I think finding the good mix is really critical. So I'm glad you got both degrees to help you with that. Anybody else have questions? You don't have to be afraid, no one's going to bite you. We're all young professionals who are all passionate about space. So literally anything you have, whether it be related to your career, academics, I'm sure the panelists would be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I'll just add on to something that Rohit was saying about visiting planets. I was just listening to Dylan Taylor's book about Gerard O'Neill, and O'Neill cylinders. And they were talking about how he had these idea for large, huge scale cylinders at a Lagrange point far away from Earth. And the idea in part came from when he'd asked his students to evaluate, is the moon or Mars or some other planet the best place for humans to be? And it was his students that came up with the idea that says, no, actually, you'd be better off in space and not trying to, terraform Mars or have habitats on Mars or live on the moon. It's just you could recreate. There's so many advantages of being in space, and that's how we kind of got started on this idea of O'Neill cylinders and all the advantages that come with that. So like just changed my mind about, oh yeah, maybe we're not going to go live on other planets. Maybe we're just going to go live, in space like that. So who knows? You may see that in your lifetime. Not sure about mine, but yours.
It's an interesting point that you make. What, in your opinion, anybody can answer this, of like, what is the biggest challenge, whether it be like medically or technologically, the biggest challenge to be able to colonize the planet, or to go on to have like a presence on the moon, a human presence on Mars? What's like the biggest, innovation or jump we need to make?
It's in our humanity. It's our mentality of scarcity. So we're all racing to try to get what we can get. And so the message that we can really give to the world and give to humans, and this is a hard message because people who are wanting to go get, they're not buying the message, but the message is that space has unlimited resources, guys. Let's just get out there and stop fighting. And I think that it's until we get past the asteroid belt that humanity is going to be at risk, because we're just still fighting over resources and over who's going to be in charge and who gets Mars and which laws are going to rule those things. I think it's in our minds. I think that, in my opinion, this is what I've specialized in, but so maybe I'm hypersensitive to it, but I think that's our biggest challenge, is our own humanity and our own sense of competing.
I think to piggyback off of that, if I were to describe like the speed at which we're innovating in different areas, I think technologically we're at like 100 miles an hour. We're doing a great job. Maybe I'm biased because I think Starship is going to take us like really far here. But just in general, like I think we all get the sense that like the tech is just moving quickly, and innovation is like, it's a factory of innovation in the space sector. Second to that is like sort of the policy regulation, like what are we doing here sort of thing. That's at maybe like 60 miles an hour. We're not keeping up with that enough. We're not having enough like global forums and collaboration to think about like, how is this going to affect different countries, different people, like how can we work together? And then the thing that's moving the slowest is just advancements in like diversity in the sector. That's probably more like 40 miles an hour. We're still having issues where there's like, whether you're thinking about skewed age or like skewed race or gender, we're having to play a lot of catch up here, where finally like women are making their way into these roles. But it's still like, even when I go to some of these conferences, they welcome like these very esteemed leaders, and it's just a bunch of like guys. And I would love to just see a woman up there like being super empowering. I was fortunate enough to see a really amazing talk from the director of the Canadian Space Agency, Lisa Campbell. And I was like, yes, she's amazing. She's doing a great job. And that's not only important for the industry itself, making our way through problems in a much more productive manner, but also inspiring the youth, because it's such a barrier for people who can't see themselves in these positions, because the industry is innovating quicker than we're actually evolving in terms of diversity and inclusion. That's what I think the biggest barrier is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Something just building on that point is, I definitely agree that we have a huge gap in, the workforce. I think it's so apparent. Like I was mentioning the other day, like actually a few weeks ago, I went to a conference in New York City, and it was like the Luxembourg Space Finance Conference. And it was, I swear I was the only young student, but there were only 3 women at that conference, 3 or 4. And it was crazy to see, how it's still a problem. But I know we have a lot of initiatives that are working towards showing that space is for everyone and trying to open up those doors. So we're getting there slowly, but there's a lot of programs like the Brooke Owens Fellowship, the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship, that are working towards bridging that gap and hopefully encouraging the next generation of, the next workforce to be more diverse. Any other thoughts on this topic?
I think you're right about the challenges of cooperation and the openness for people to work with other countries, across borders, all that. That's kind of what you're saying, Rebecca.
Speaking of the overview effect, which if anyone doesn't know what the overview effect is, as in Sophia's words, go read the news and figure out. Frank White will be speaking in about 25 minutes, and he coined the term the overview effect, which is that cognitive shift in your thinking when you see your home, when a human sees the home planet from space. How does that affect the way that, like, forever, there's like a cognitive shift, and you think of Earth differently. You don't think of it as your country, their country, our squabbles, this and that. You just see that everyone is in this together. We're all on this spaceship Earth. And so after this panel, please join us in the main room to hear Frank White speak. He is a true gem and a pleasure to listen to. So thanks for that, Ron.
Yeah, I think just building up on that, on the overview effects, I think Carl Sagan's pale blue dot speech is really inspiring. So I think if you haven't listened to that one, just, listen to that. That is honestly such an inspiring talk. He's amazing. So yeah.
And as we're kind of coming up here, closing our time together here in this panel, for the panelists, did you have anything you wanted to share that we didn't ask you about, or something you just want to shout out, whether it be like your socials or something coming up, whether it be with your organizations, conference, anything at all you want to share that you haven't gotten to? The stage and the floor is all yours.
I think two things I probably forgot to mention directly. One was SEDS, which I think Sophia may have mentioned. If you are a student, go look into that. That is kind of the answer to the platform, other than like Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. So check out SEDS if you're a student. That is a good way to get involved. And then I totally forgot the other one, so come back to me and maybe I'll remember it.
Are you thinking of SGAC?
That is another good one. I was going to say something completely different, though. It's all right. Come back to me.
What was the SGAC?
SGAC is the Space Generation Advisory Council. I've actually recently gotten involved with them. I wish I had gotten involved earlier. Huge international nonprofit with tons of different students and young professionals. They hold conferences, they offer scholarships, they have project groups, interest groups, mentorship. Like, it's really the full 9 yards. They're awesome.
Cool. Thanks. I'm just looking at it.
Yeah, one of the ladies I know, her name is Ruvimbo Samanga, and she's a space lawyer in Zimbabwe, and she got her start to her career through SGAC. She participated in one of their international contests and was selected as a winner, got fully funded to go to IAC like 2 or 3 years ago, and now she's a decorated space lawyer in Africa. So it's incredible how SGAC is opening doors for a lot of young students.
I think if I were to give my last final words, it would be that it's okay if your path into the space industry is not direct or not linear. I've run into plenty of colleagues where their skill set is what brought them towards their role, and not necessarily some progression where it's like, okay, NASA, aerospace, blah, blah, blah. People I worked with in supply chain at SpaceX, for example, their previous role might have been at like a toy company or like Nike or something that wasn't space related, but they had the same skill set and they applied it towards their interest. So if you feel like you're not grasping onto anything in the space industry and the opportunities aren't coming to you at the times that you want them most, it's okay to still focus on developing your skill set so that when it's time for you to just make that horizontal shift, you can say, I have been doing these things for a while. I know how to speak the language. I know how to, whether it's I know how to code, or I know how to translate between technical and non-technical people, or I know how to make art, like whatever it is, like your skill set is going to be your best buddy, even if the space industry is kind of making you feel like you don't belong there. So don't lose hope. You will find your way there, even if it doesn't feel like it's right away. And then also, shameless plug, you can check out my website, sophiajones.space, if you want to learn more. Happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't think if anybody else, nothing else to say. I want to thank you all for taking your time to do this panel. I had a great time catching up and also learning about all the initiatives and organizations you're part of, as well as how you got your start to this industry. And to kind of close us out, I did want to take a picture with everyone who's in this room. I think it would be great to just kind of highlight on social media. So anybody who's comfortable turning on their camera, I would love to have you in the picture. Okay, I'm gonna start taking the picture, smile. Okay, I got one. I'm gonna make sure everyone's, okay, I think everyone smiled. Okay, we're good. Yeah, thank you so much for this panel discussion. I had a great time and I hope to meet everyone in person soon. And we should all connect on social media because clearly networking is the right way to go for young professionals. Okay.
Thanks, Gitika. It's awesome.
Please join us.
Thank you so much, Gitika.
I think the main
Thanks, Gitika.
is in 3 minutes. I think, is it, Ron? Is that right?
Yeah, we have 3 minutes.
Yeah,
but we
go to the
could
main
have
room
an hour.
and listen to Frank.